Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, here we are, sitting in my living room. Normally we do this online. Normally it's a conversation that's not done face to face, but I'm very pleased to be entertaining, providing hospitality for Ben Galloway. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stu. I really appreciate the fact that you can take me in and look after me, and that we can spend some time together. Going up to Sheffield tomorrow, so it'll be an enjoyable couple of days. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that as well. We can talk about that as we move through. But as always, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So you come and spend a bit of time with me, and I drag you off to my local hockey club to come coaching with me, and be interested to get your views and your experiences of working, in my environment and working in field hockey. Not a game that you're necessarily that familiar with, but lots of transferability to the football field.
Yeah, so I guess it was the first time that I've ever coached or ever been involved in field hockey. I've never played the game. I've never really experienced it before. So to be on the field and to get the opportunity to muck around and do some stuff, it was fantastic. Definitely transferable, and I brought in what I'm working on in my masters and looking at 1v0 games, and was able to do that today again this afternoon with the kids.
Well, you just when you thought that your work was done, I think I'll just take advantage of having you here and get some free coach development. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on the session, the design, the activities, the engagement, etc., good or bad. Just any observations would be good to have.
Yeah, sure. So I guess for the guys who are listening, I'll take you through how the session worked. So we came. It's obviously the players there was different levels of ability. We started with an arrival activity, which I know a lot of coaches are already doing, and I can highly recommend doing something like that, and definitely something that I do in my own coaching, just to get people engaged and on the run. And you could see it straight away. All the kids, there's no time wasted. They're arriving at different times, but we're still getting them all active and ready to rock and roll. And that was just a small chasing game, and in line with the theme of dribbling that we were doing for the session. So to start off with, I thought that was fantastic. And then we had about 25-30 kids for the session, and we had 3 activities running at the same time, 10 kids in each activity, and going through them. 2 opposed sessions, and then I guess what I brought, which was a little bit of unopposed, and 1v0, which I felt flowed well. I didn't get to see a lot of what the other coaches were doing during the session, but I can appreciate how it's run at community level, and we're working with volunteer coaches, and I think the way that you interacted, the way that you were able to involve the dads who were giving up their time and coming to get involved was fantastic, and something that we all need to continue to do. And community sport is really all we have. Like, it's such a major and important part of what we can provide in in the sports that we do, whether it be field hockey, whether it be football, whether it be cricket, whether it be AFL, whether it be rugby, any of those things. So we need to be able to involve the parents in the way that you did today. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. We had moments where, okay, in the activities, 30-second chat. Let's have a small conversation. Let's see what was happening here. Let's ask some questions. Let's give a couple of points out for the people who are hitting what we intended to hit for the session, which is incredibly important to be able to do those things. And I guess we talk about it a lot, or I know you talked to Ian recently about the idea of consequences or the idea of praise or what that might look like, and we want to give people something to work towards in the session. So if we're going to Ollie, hey Ollie, well done there, I'll give you a point for that, I'll give you a point for that, or even in the 1v0 that I was doing, okay, we have two people racing against each other, okay, keep count of your score. Make sure you know what your score is at during the session, and acknowledge that. So yeah, no, I thought there's lots of positives. I think we come across, and this is a big discussion point that I know a lot of coaches will understand, is okay, how do we deal with the differentiation? How do we deal with working with kids from different maybe ability levels? How do we approach that? I think this afternoon or this evening when we did it, you could see that we were able to engage a group of different abilities, and in a way within that group of 10 you can say, okay, we'll put 2 here, we'll put 2 here, we'll change that, and that was happening all on the run. We're doing that throughout the whole training session. You're doing it, you're observing what other coaches are doing, you're coming around, oh, hey Ollie, come and play against this guy, or come do this, and that's how you're going to work. Or, as I saw a couple of times, you'd pull an individual person out, and you'd say, hey, let's have a conversation. The game's still going. Everything else is still going on in the background, and we're just having a quick chat here off to the side. Which I know you've talked about with a lot of coaches before, and like seeing it come to fruition and seeing those things actually happen, that's really important.
You had an interesting moment we were talking about as we were sort of coming away in the car, where there was a young player who was hanging back, staying out of the game, and you were engaged in that point in the game, and you were sort of encouraging him to become more involved, and his response to you. So just take me through that bit, because that was really illuminating. Yeah.
So there was a player called Oliver, and he was at the back. He was hanging out the back, and we see it in football. We see it in a lot of young age sport, and especially in community sport, where we have players come in who are trying the sport out for the first time, who are just getting involved in it. Maybe you get it in school sport as well. And he was at the back, and he told me, I went up to him like, the ball's up the other end. What are you doing back here? And he said, well, mate, if I'm back here, I don't have to touch the ball. Kind of like the Mr. Bean video, if anyone's seen the Mr. Bean video, where he's doing pretend cars out the back. And then after a period of time, the ball came closer to him, and he made a tackle. And straight after he made the tackle, Stu congratulated him, and then I went up to him and I gave him a high five as well, and I went, mate, that was awesome. Well done. And then he self-promoted himself to the midfield. He said, I'm coming into the midfield. But like I said to you on the way back when we were in the car, I said, all it takes is one of those little moments where someone grows in confidence and they go, yeah, I can do this, I can play this sport, or I can be involved, which is really what it's all about.
Yeah, and it was quite interesting, was I'd sort of seen that moment and given my, made that kind of very public, wow, that was great. I mean, it wasn't relevant necessarily to the main theme of the night, which was about carrying the ball, but it was just something that I felt was really worthy of mention. And I also knew, as you probably had already picked up, that he was an individual who, in general, can find himself disengaged. And it was quite also, I then moved on to other things. It was you who'd kind of picked up the fact that he then put himself into the midfield. I'd not noticed that, which was really useful to me because it showed the power and the value of just that little moment of recognition for that individual and the confidence that's then given him for him to then re-engage or in fact engage. So that was a really good thing. The other bit that I think was really was useful as well is that I'd done most of the planning on WhatsApp, and I'd created some videos on Show Me, this iPad app, which is like a really, in fact, in my opinion, it's really useful for session design because it you can talk over the top of while you're drawing, and so people get a real sense of what you're trying to do. It's much better than just pure paper and written stuff. So I'd sent them these videos on WhatsApp as stimuluses and thought ideas, and then set this kind of challenge for the group of coaches that we work with that our aim was to provide kind of a moment of positive reinforcement, a kind of a recognition of a strength, superpower or something, and then also to just raise awareness of space for the players, and how they utilise space, because that's obviously an important aspect of how they carry the ball, which is the important element here, and using whether it's a question or whatever it might be, but that moment of that kind of looking for the moments of positivity and publicly recognising those, or publicly or privately. On some occasions it was private. I was to pull somebody one side and say, "I love what you tried to do there." And is there something else that could happen maybe beyond that, or just raising the question and posing the ideas. But for me, that was just showed to me that value of challenging ourselves to not necessarily look for the correction, which is what we would, or certainly what I would instinctively do, but challenging ourselves to look for the moments of I guess recognising the moments where an individual makes an action that's in line with what we're trying to do within the session plan. I know this one was slightly offbeat, but you just couldn't let it go. You had to make that moment, didn't you? Because it was so great.
Yeah.
And the power of that to that individual, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Yeah, no, and I think there was another boy there. That was his first session.
Yeah.
I saw you talking to him at the end, but there was a couple of moments throughout the activities that I was doing, and I was going, mate, you're doing fantastic. Like you're doing well. This is one of the first times that he's ever played field hockey before, and he's having a crack. I don't know. I forget his name. Ekraj. Yeah. So new boy to the program. Had a lot of confidence. I saw him in the first activity. He was lacking a little bit. Like, okay, he was a bit scared, a bit hold offish.
Yeah.
But then towards the end in the game, he's getting involved. He's doing all these things, and like you said, I don't think you can undervalue the feeling of recognition for doing something, even if it's extremely small, even if it's an extremely small moment. That recognition of I've done something as a player, or I've done something as an individual on this field, makes them feel validated and makes them feel like, okay, I want to do something. I want to do something next. And it's incredible to see. It really is, and I guess that's why we love. That's why so many people who are listening to this podcast right now do what they do.
Yeah.
They chase moments like that. We chase moments like that as coaches and as physical educators, because we've experienced that ourselves, and we've had that feeling and that desire to be a part of that, and to see other people have that, doesn't matter what level they're at, is incredible. And I really enjoyed that moment. Yeah,
I had a really interesting moment with him as well. His dad had rung me earlier in the day to say, we're thinking we're going to come up, and is there anything we need? And I'd spoken to him and said, just bring him along. And what was really interesting was the way his dad spoke. He'd sort of made it sound like he was really quite experienced, and it's clear I think he played a little, but not a great deal. But anyway, in the game I was involved with, Tim, my assistant coach, it was great actually. He said to me, "Look, there's a couple of players here that I'll get past to, or I can't get the ball," and he said, "Look, we need to do the superpower." Now it's brilliant for me because I've been working with Tim for a little while now, and he's definitely like my right hand man. But when somebody that you're working with like starts to spot this stuff that you don't spot, that's just brilliant, right? So he said, "Okay, we need to do the superpower," and I'm like, "Well, okay, great." So he then called it out. He says, "Right, player on the red team, you're." So he pointed out this particular player. Every time he scores a bonus point or a goal, double points. And then I called out, this was Ekraj as well, who was getting a bit bypassed. Every time Ekraj gets the ball, double points. And so that we then put that in play. But what was really interesting was then Ekraj started to get the ball more, but Ekraj didn't want to make a mistake, so Ekraj just started to give it away. He didn't use an opportunity to get a bonus, he didn't use an opportunity to get a goal, he just started to pass it. He wasn't giving it away, he was just passing it. He was making some nice little passes, it was lovely, But I said, so I had to go over to him a little bit later on and just said, "You're making some lovely passes, Ekraj, right? But how do you get bonuses in this game?" It's like, "Yeah, we're doing the carrying." And I said, "You can go for that if you want, Don't worry about it if you make a mistake, because that's how you're going to get bonuses for your team." And then, he had a go and he didn't quite make it, but at least he had a go. But it was that kind of key moment how I recognised there as well, that, just that emphasis. So he got far more of the ball, because the team then obviously recognised his value, right, which was great, so we'd almost done that differentiator. But there was a bit of a challenge in terms of his own recognition of what that enabled him to do. And so I guess I reflected on that a little bit as to whether maybe I should have even strengthened that a little bit more, maybe made it 5 points or bigger bonus, I don't know, or maybe it just needed that intervention and to get him to understand, because it's his first session, so we didn't want to make any mistakes, so he couldn't expect him necessarily just to go and have a go, like some of the other kids who've been there for a while, including my own son, who's perfectly happy to carry the ball as hard as he can because he's got full license because his dad's the coach, so yeah.
Well, no, but I think you can't take the power away from just that one moment in the first session.
Sure.
And now, okay, what does that lead to?
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to come in the next session, and that could be an extremely powerful moment in this child's sporting experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we all get to hold on to, is that any of those little moments that we can influence, we can do something like add a superpower, we can do something like add a little bit of individual praise, or we can give some individual feedback. Those moments are what makes someone's sporting career. And I know, drawing it to some theory, we can bring it in and we can talk about theory of form of life, and we can look at what makes up someone's form of life. And we can never underestimate what little moments like that might do. And I know, so the guys who listen to this podcast and know the last time I was heading over to Uganda.
I'm going to talk to you about that,
Yeah, so I've come back, but there was a goalkeeper that we had. We did some trials in rural Uganda. There's a goalkeeper called Mubarak. And this guy doesn't have boots, doesn't have gloves, doesn't have anything, comes from unbelievably poor background. And we're doing trials. And we have to do trials because we can't take everyone. Otherwise we'd have a million kids. Anyway, so...
And if you had the resources, you'd have them.
Yeah, of course. You can't. You can't do it. But little moments of talk from one of the other coaches gave this guy confidence, and he started to do some pretty cool things in the game. And he went from a rural trial where he literally, we gave all the kids boots, but they rocked up with no boots. He was dirty as hell, the kid. He'd come from, you knew he'd come from a poor background, didn't have gloves or anything, and he made it into the academy. Now he's in the academy full time. And I honestly believe that part of it comes to the fact that during that trial, one of the other coaches went up to him and said, "You're doing the right thing, keep doing what you're doing." And then we as coaches, as a group, made a decision, okay, we'll bring him for a residential trial and he'll come and spend some time with us. And then from that, he had nothing else going for him. Education-wise, English-wise, terrible. We had to work with him and we were doing English lessons with him twice a week, and we're trying to promote his English and get him better. Academically very poor. Character-wise, he was a great kid. He had a lot of confidence about him. but yeah, like that moment where he could just feel like he was at home and then bring that and expose himself and get out there. And he did that in that trial. Then we brought him to the residential trial. He continued to do that. Now he's in the academy full time. So, and it's emphasised there, and I've talked about this before, it's emphasised there, but it's no different to what we get to experience in our own communities, in our own backyards with our own kids that we work with every day. And there's so much value in those little moments that we can't underestimate them. And we really, as coaches, need to look at that and go, okay, well that creates their form of life, and those little moments change people. And everything around them, of course, the culture and everything around them influences that as well. But every moment leads to a new moment, and it does. I truly believe that, and I think a lot of coaches believe that as well.
So, I mean, for me, that the work you were doing out there in Uganda with Football for Good, I mean, that's what it exists to do, doesn't it? Is to get kids like Mubarak, who would never have a chance, and expose them to a different experience, I suppose, and to provide them with, or to sort of equalise some of the, the disadvantages, and obviously provide them with. I mean, it's clearly, it's a much more. And it's because it's residential. I'm assuming then that, it's a fully holistic experience in the sense that you're not just dealing with pitch time. You're dealing with the other time, the educational side, the behavioural side, the character development and everything else. It's a full-on educational experience. It's much more than just being a footy coach, isn't it? I mean, not to discredit being a footy coach, but you know what I mean? It's that you're fully immersed in their lives.
For sure. It's definitely a different
much more than what I mean when I say not being a footy coach. I mean, if you thought you were going there basically to do some football sessions, you were disabused of that notion quite early on.
Yeah. No, and the work that is being done at Football for Good, and there's another academy in Malawi called Ascent, and what these guys are doing is truly amazing. Because yes, we're going into countries that don't have, like, there's a stat I was reading before I went to Uganda that 3 out of 10 kids finish primary school. So we're not only giving them football, but we would give them free education, and then we do academic support 3 times a week with them, and then we do character with them. So we're giving them, like you said, a holistic experience of maybe education, which a lot of our kids get access to in the Western world, and isn't as much or isn't as available in Africa, and especially in East Africa, where they've had a lot of turmoil and where they've had a lot of issues. So you take a lot away from that experience and that perspective that it gives you, and I want to bring that back to my own community. And I want other people to bring that to their own communities and go, you know what, this is what sport can give people. This is like we're in, like, and I mean, this could get very political very quickly, or get very away from what people might listen to this podcast for. But the truth of the matter is, when we look at sport and when we try to understand these things, what it offers the community is so much more than maybe what we realise at the beginning. And the hockey sessions that we do today, and the confidence that might give Oliver, or to be able to do something at school, and to be able to do this and to be able to do that, is incredibly powerful. And it's, like I said before, it's emphasised when you see it in East Africa. But it's no like what everyone is doing in their communities in helping, and what volunteer dads are doing is so very important for the development of our children. It really is. And we can't take anything away from that.
I mean, and listen, I'm all for getting a bit political, albeit it's a bit of a dangerous game to play at the moment with what's going on in the current British political scene. The one thing I'd say, though, is I'm not an enormous fan of the things that are going on in within our political landscape at the moment. But the one thing this particular government has done that I have to give it credit for is recognise that within its sports strategy, because what they said was, look, it's all well and good increasing participation, and that is something we want to do, but we want to do it not because increasing participation is a good thing in its own right. We want to increase participation because of the things that sport can bring. And they do it across 5 different areas, individual development, physical development, social and community cohesion, economic development, and also mental well-being. And for me now, that's that genuine recognition of the role that sport and physical activity plays in people's lives. And as such, what that's now done is, I think, recognise the important role that coaches play in fostering and nurturing that, because sport is if you think of sport as a product, which I'm not a fan of doing, but let's imagine you do, that product is provided very often by individuals that we know as coaches. It's a service often. So if you think of sport as a service industry or an entertainment industry for that matter, then what's important to recognise is the quality of that experience, the quality of that service really makes a difference, and therefore those individuals who provide that service or that experience or that entertainment are central, and how they're supported and how they're helped to develop, how they're helped to improve, how they're nurtured, retained, and feel and are made to feel valuable as part of our community is, again, an important thing. For a long time, I think coaches have just been seen as a means to an end, like the delivery vehicle for the product, and as long as the numbers keep going up, we're all good. I don't think that clearly just isn't going to cut anymore. It's now about quality of experience. And assumption being then, if you focus on quality of experience, then you're going to get your participation numbers, but not just participation numbers for the sake of participation numbers.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads us to a battle that we know we're having against all kinds of technological and video games and all that kind of stuff that we know that we're having with our own kids that are wanting to spend their time doing other things. Like if we're talking about a product, or we're talking about the fact that we want them to have an experience, then that's what they need to have.
Yeah.
And but I think it's more than that. Yeah. To be fair, like I think, okay, we want them to have an experience, but I think also it comes down to how we want the next generations to live life.
Yeah.
Like, if we talk about form of life, if we talk about our own ecological niche, if we talk about how we want to set our communities up, sport can be a really central part of that, and has the potential to play a massive role. If it isn't already, but it could play a bigger role. And I know. So basically, when I go back to Brisbane, I've signed up. I'm going to be coaching my community club. As soon as I left Uganda, I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to my club that I was coaching at before. Also to give me time to do my masters, but because I thoroughly believe in what community sport offers, and the change that we can make with it, and the things that we can do, and how we can educate parents, and how we can educate people about experiencing life, and appreciating certain things, and letting their children appreciate those things, because the world needs it. I don't want to get political here, but the world needs it.
No.
And the next generation needs it. And I'm young enough to look at this and go, wow, we've made some mistakes, and we need to change what those mistakes were. And the best way to do that is to influence our kids that are coming up, and for them to understand, okay, we've got to look at this a different way, and we've got to ride this out, and then there's going to be some new things that come.
But I mean, I think politics comes into everything, really, doesn't it? But I think, I mean, you're right. I mean, if there's ever a time where young people need more opportunity for expression, more opportunity for creativity, more opportunity for connection, more opportunity for forging the bonds that community sport creates. You know, some sports, I mean, I used to work in rugby, and one of the things that I think rugby's tremendous at, certainly in my experience, is creating connections between human beings that it's almost... I know lots of sports can do the same thing, and I don't want to say, but the one thing that I've noticed about rugby is it does pride itself on that idea. And, you know, it's easy to talk about all this sort of stuff in the abstract, but for me, that's the bit that I don't think we can lose sight of, in the sense of... and it's not just the rise of technology and almost like, you know, you're the most connected ever and yet the most lonely. So you've got all that stuff going on in the background, but also you've got you know, almost like a political background that is forging separation everywhere, as countries seem to, you know, at the moment anyway, it feels to me anyway, are kind of retreating to their borders, if you like, and locking the doors and going, we'll be all right as long as we hunker down and we keep everybody out, which in my mind is like the absolute opposite of the way young people want to live their lives. They actually want more connection. They want to see more of the world. They want to have, I mean, and you're a classic example, you know, you've been globe-trotting for a little while and spending time in other cultures and this, that and the other. You've even spent a little bit of time in the extremities of the UK, in Wales and Scotland, and you know, yeah. I mean that. You know, but you would probably have noticed, and a lot of people don't realise this who have visited this country, is actually how the United Kingdom, while we call it a United Kingdom, there are still some quite different cultural things in different parts of our country, as there are in any country, and actually. People want to embrace that, enjoy that, and this, that, and the other. And my view is that I think sport acts as a means by which to facilitate the I suppose the qualities, attributes, yeah, maybe, in people to do more of that, create more connection with others, understand others' differences, value others' differences, you know, understand diversity rather than trying to retreat in. Now, I know it can be just as equally tribal, get all that, but if you look at it from that positive spin, for me, there's a case to be made for the world of sport in terms of in the landscape we're in now.
For sure, and in terms of UK, in terms of England, Scotland, and Wales, I must say, in terms of rubbish, England is 10 million times behind. Pick up your rubbish, please, people. Stop
dirty country.
Just put it in the bin. Just put it in the bin. Like, Wales has got something going on where they understand, okay, let's look after, let's put stuff in the bin.
Yeah. But no one lives there, that's why.
Maybe that's part of the problem. I think it's interesting that
you did go to Snowdonia, which is one of the most beautiful parts of the country.
I know,
and you spent time in cities following the Ashes, so you have probably seen an awful lot of rubbish everywhere, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I must say, like, even Cardiff in Wales was beautiful. Like,
it is.
You walk along the boardwalk there and everything like that. What I will say is that this idea of closing borders or of saying, okay, well, we don't want to share, we want to be nationalistic.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes I get that feeling that happens with sport.
Yeah.
And not from a club's perspective, not from a sport, but, okay, in Australia, for example, my local community club, there's a football club, there's a rugby club, there's a cricket club, there's an AFL club, all at the same location.
Right.
Each one has their own clubhouse.
Oh, wow.
Each one has their own groundsman looking after the fields and everything like that.
You can't just pool all those resources then.
Exactly.
And bring everyone together.
Why doesn't that happen?
Really?
Like, it's a competition between... Okay, so the football club has the most participants. They have a bigger participant pool. But why aren't they... Like, I would love to see... Let's pull together, let's build a bigger clubhouse. Let's build maybe a restaurant or something where we have people coming in and spending money and putting that towards the club. Let's pool our resources so that we can all look after the fields. let's put some money together and build something where we can have an extra facility, maybe an AstroTurf or something like that, where we can have everyone training together. Those things should be happening. That's where we need to go.
Yeah.
We can't. You can't neglect that. There's no point in saying, okay, well, we want to be divided, or it's rugby versus football versus AFL. It's not worth it. Let's join together because we're in the same fight. We're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to bring community together. That's our ultimate aim, and that's a really difficult thing for me to deal with. And I look at it and I go, and I get frustrated because I just wonder if it's down to ego, if it's down to, okay, like, it's more important that we get more player numbers in our sport than your sport. Well, like, and every governing body has the mission, okay, we want to increase participation, we want to have the biggest numbers. Well, what if the governing bodies went, okay, you know what, we're going to work through this together. We're going to be together here, and we all want to grow in participation because we want sport to grow as participation, and we want communities to grow. And that's genuinely where I think we need to go into the future. And it's going to have to change big time to do that. But podcasts like yourself, where we have the opportunity to share a message like this, where we have lots of people who are doing sport, and we're not brought together because of a single sport. We're brought together because we understand skill acquisition or skill movement in a certain way, or we understand teaching or pedagogy in a certain way. That's where we could potentially go. Is, okay, we're joining in a pedagogical understanding of how we want to coach, and we bring lots of people together through that. And I see a lot of benefit in doing that. I see a huge amount of at QUT, at the university that I was teaching at and where I'm doing my masters, you have a range of people coming together, first year subject, where we do a game-based unit. Ian Renshaw obviously was running it. There's another guy that came in, Adam Gorman, who's running it now, but Ian still oversees and helps out. And we just talk about coaching and how we can engage with people. And we have people from all different sports who are connecting, who are coaching other people how to coach their sport through the same understanding and underpinning theoretical model, which is heartening.
Yeah,
because that's where, and that's the generation coming through, and that's where we need to take it. Is, okay, we don't care what sport you play. We just love the fact that you're playing sport, and that you're experiencing it, and that you're able to experience it in a way where you're able to express yourself and do the things that we talked about before, which we want our kids and our young people to be able to do.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about David Epstein's book, Range, and I think one of the great messages in Range is how variety and utilize and engaging in a range of different activities is so good for individuals, not only for their well-being, etc., but also from the perspective of, I mean, if you are interested in the development of skilled performers and talented individuals, the more activities they do, the better they seem to be in terms of their expertise. And he just provides a range of examples and evidence which contradict that sort of dominant narrative that you've got to do this sport and you've got to be doing it from day one, and if you don't do that sport from day one, you're never going to make it to the elite levels. And I'm seeing that now so often in quite a lot of sports now, which are either trying to get individuals younger and younger and younger, or they're doing it through stealth. They're not explicitly doing it. They're just putting provision on in such a way that it makes it very difficult for an individual to do anything else. Right. And that, I find, is becoming increasingly prevalent. I mean, an example would be, I know I was talking to a parent a while back who was saying about her son, who'd been involved in he'd actually involved in field hockey, but he'd only just started playing not long ago. Really capable player, but he'd been involved in professional football academies from the age of about 7, and how he was getting to that point now of, you know, not really enjoy it, etc., etc. So I think that's a really interesting concept, isn't it? This idea of if an organisation is thinking either from the perspective of participation, because if the earlier you start and the more specialist you are, the more likely they are to not want to continue. So you're self-defeating there. But if you're also thinking about it from the perspective of their long-term development as an athlete, well, you're probably self-defeating there too, because the broader they can be, the better they get.
And as a human being,
yeah.
Like, why not give someone an experience where they can experience as many things as possible?
Yeah, because it's good for them in the first place.
It's not a bad thing for people to experience lots of different things.
Yeah, oh no, I'm totally with you on that, and that should be the primary consideration. But if, you know, let's just imagine that there are organisations out there who maybe aren't thinking like that, right. They're only thinking about what they get out of it, well, here's the kicker.
Of course, yeah.
So a more humanistic, holistic approach gets you a better outcome as well.
Yeah.
So who knew, you know?
Well, yeah, and a range first chapter.
Yeah.
Tiger Woods
versus
Roger Federer.
Yeah.
And Federer could have specialised early, wanted to keep playing football, could have gone up the age, like a lot of arguments, like the better players need to go up age groups and whatnot. Roger Federer went up for a little bit, said, no, I can't be doing this, I need to go back down. His mother was a tennis coach, didn't really coach him at all, just let him make his decision. He said, mate, I want to talk about music, so I want to go back down to my age group. I want to be doing stuff with my mates. So like that's so very important. We can't lose track of that. We really, like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I plead with people not to lose track of that. And we've talked about this before, and I know in my first podcast I came across very passionately about the idea of backyard games. Mm-hmm. And this is where backyard games comes to the forefront.
Yeah.
Because I wrote a poem when I did one of my first conferences ever that I spoke at, was for Football Queensland. And I wrote a poem about my own childhood. And I talked about playing on the street. And one of the lines was talking about the games that we used to play. So I said, there's no adult telling us what we could and couldn't do. We could play AFL, we could play rugby, we could play cricket, we could play football, we could play capture the flag, we could ride our bikes, we could do scooter, we could do all these things.
Yeah.
We need to create safe spaces where that can happen. And that's where community sports coming together can do that, because they can pool their resources and they can make those things happen.
Yeah. And
I feel very passionately about this, and I think Mark Upton recently even posted a little, he brought up on Twitter, and I was reading through it, and he was showing these multi-sport fields. And I've seen a couple around the UK, and I've been quite impressed, because they've got a basketball hoop, they've got a football field, they've got a little goal, and they've got maybe somewhere you can hit a racket and do those things as well. In Australia, we don't have any of those. Why aren't we making those, or why aren't we making them accessible? And then in the UK, if we do have them, why are we not seeing people use them?
Yeah, they definitely get underutilised.
Like, why aren't we seeing people use them, and what do we have to do? And that's the question that we need to be asking ourselves, is what do we have to do to get people to use them? And then why in Australia don't we have them at all? And is part of the problem this desire to be put in organised sport at a young age?
Yeah.
Is part of the problem that we want people to be in competitions from a young age? Is that we want people to be competing against each other, that we want people specialising early, and we don't want to give them the freedom to explore these things. And that's something that we all experience. And I guess that's a question that you have to pose yourself as your own coach. It's like, really, like, if you think about it, like, if you're an organiser of a community club, what do you really want to happen?
Yeah.
Like, what do you really want to happen? Do you want this kid to play sport for 5 years and then get burnt out and not play anymore or get injured? Which we know the research is there to show. Like, people can't argue with that research. We can't just be focusing on 0.1%. We need to be focusing on 99.
But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are some pretty powerful influences that are, I guess, acting upon. I'm looking at this through an ecological lens. So I'm looking at, okay, so what are the kind of drivers, the messages? What are the environmental influences that are causing perfectly rational human beings to behave like this? And I've got a blog post that I'm yet to publish. I'm probably just going to spoil it all now. No one will need to read it. But I've called it the lamentable lemmings of talent development. And because you've got all these people who know this stuff, they know, but they just keep following the herd. They keep following the others over the same old cliff. And what you hear a lot is, so in professional sports world, if we don't do it, those people around the court, our biggest rivals, will do it. So we've got to, otherwise we will lose our edge. So that's you've got some significant drivers there. You've got the economic drivers of, missing out on the star that could, be, make the club a load of money. But even down to the parent side, right? I mean, there are some significant influences there, and a lot of this stems from, I think, this, I guess, idea that parents are often driven by this desire to do the best for their children and give them every opportunity possible and everything else. And as a result of that, parents are often feeling like if they don't send their child to that or this training or that training, regardless of the economic cost, regardless of the cost on the family dynamic, regardless of the cost in time, then they're not doing their best. And I think that's really powerful, and sports policymakers have a lot to answer for as far as that's concerned, because parents shouldn't be put in that position. Going back to that parent I was talking about the other day, she had no conceptualisation whatsoever that what she was doing might be in any way detrimental. She just felt she was doing the right thing for her son to take him, halfway across the country every weekend to go to matches and training and this, that and the other. And, you see, there's a part of me that does find that really quite challenging, and it's an area that I do. I mean, what was really interesting was to see that article that came out, I think it was this week, the 5 main codes in New Zealand all coming together to almost like agree that they're not essentially going to compete for players, or they're going to reduce talent, they're not going to do selective stuff, and it needs that kind of collective vision to say, we're better than this. And then it was interesting how a number of others said, I wish that could happen in our country, I wish that could happen in our country. And so it definitely gave me pause for thought about, what are we all in this for?
Yeah, you always need to have pioneers. You always need to have people that go, you know what, and a country like New Zealand doing that is hopefully a guide for what's going to happen next. And we can look at that and go, well, like, we need to have a look at that, and we need to take note of that and change the way. I mean, the All Blacks did it. Everyone took note of the All Blacks. No one didn't look at the All Blacks and go, okay, we need to change our cultures. Yeah. So hopefully we can follow suit in a lot of countries about what they're doing in that way. I mean, I can understand and I can empathise. I actually do feel like I can have empathy for the academies and the people who feel this economic drive to do what they're doing.
Of course. And they are. I'm not trying to say that those individuals are, in any way, kind of bad actors.
No,
they are doing a good job.
Yeah.
In an imperfect system, they are doing the best they possibly can. Yeah. It's not about the people. It's just about the policies in the system.
Exactly. So and it takes brave people to say we got to do it differently.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's what I admire people like Debbie Sayers at Salisbury Rovers and over in the States, Ted Croughton at Joy of the People and
Joey Peters
in Gameplay Learn, because they're very much going against the tide. They're sticking their heads up all the time. I mean, don't get me wrong, and there's no rewards there necessarily. I mean, there's no economic benefit necessarily or anything like that, but they're just so steadfast in their commitment to providing a different experience for young people. And I mean, and they're just three of probably a load of different AIK. I mean, we're going to travel up to Sheffield to go and spend some time with some like-minded practitioners, and Mark O'Sullivan's over there, and he and a few other intrepid individuals, Dennis Horteen and Jimmy Vaughan, and actually some pretty brave decision makers at AIK have said, we're not doing it like this anymore. We're going to, we're making our academy, and they're seeing the benefits from retention, they're seeing the benefits in terms of, the kind of experiences that people are being provided with. So for me, it's happening in the professional world in certain circumstances. It's happening in the community context in certain circumstances. But I still believe that it's quite challenging. I mean, even in my environment tonight, reflecting back to that, I reflect sometimes about we could be better. We could be better. We could, tonight, how much autonomy was there for the young people? Not as much as probably there ought to be. I mean, I don't know, maybe I sometimes overcritical, but, I'd design those sessions, I'd create those games, or you'd create your game, and I'd all that sort of stuff, and the kids come along and they play, and they enjoy it, and they have a good time, and we do our best, but it's not as if it's not a joy of the people.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure I can ever be a joy of the people necessarily, and my approach is slightly different, because I want it to feel like free play as much as possible. I want it to feel like a backyard game, albeit there's people like me there whooping and hollering and throwing high fives around and giving positive messages, to feel like a backyard game. But I feel like I need to do some of the design work, because if that backyard game is going to foster or nurture something in individuals which might help them to navigate this crazy game called field hockey, then that's a piece of work I've got to do. So I feel like I'm always somewhere in between that kind of free play ideal with that's why I think constraints-led approach and the ecological approach is so powerful for me, because it gives me the framework to operate like that. I can slide into free play if I want to, and we can enjoy that, and there's opportunities for that space, and I can also slide up a little bit more, and we can provide a little bit more of an intervention, and yet always trying to not invade too much. That's always my mission.
It's the balance. It's everything in moderation. And I know with maybe the argument of it depends, or the discussion of it depends, has come out quite a lot, and I probably want to stick clear of that. But what I would say is that this is where Rod Thorpe, he talked about the idea of the drill isn't great, just the game isn't that much better. There's moments where you just need to have just the game, of course, but there's also moments where we need to add constraints, and we need to direct behaviour and afford opportunities and in design affordances into the activities that allow the players to experience a certain way of playing the game, and to help them play the game. And yes, we can always do that better, and we're always learning from that. And so we can go from an understanding of where we have a 1v0 game up until an 11v11 game, and I know that when Ian was talking to you on the podcast, he was talking about the dials. So we have those two dials, representativeness and variability. And okay, we don't want variability to be at 10, because if variability is at 10, we have complete chaos. And we don't want representativeness to be at 1. So we want to have a discussion about that, and that's where those dials come in handy. Okay, we have one at 3, we have one at 5. Let's have a discussion about that as coaches. And it's not that we're not saying that anything is right or wrong. We're saying let's just have a justified position on where we're going to approach this and reflect on that and understand what we're going to do here. And maybe we'll have moments where we have the full game, or maybe we'll have moments where we have variability right up at 10, but only for small segments, and then we'll bring it back and we'll do this, and then we'll come back and we'll make sure the game works that way, or the session works that way. So I think that's a really meaningful thing that you can take away from what Renshaw and Keith and the lads have produced there. In terms of design and where I kind of sit on all those things is as a coach, you have experiential knowledge where you can make some decisions based on what you're seeing and go, okay, maybe someone hanging 30 metres back from where the ball is not the right thing to do at this moment.
Yeah, and you can open their eyes to that.
Yeah. And maybe you'll get the response like Oliver talked to me about, okay, well, I'm hanging 30 metres back because I don't want to touch the ball. I don't want to be involved in the play. But then when he touches the ball, he gets up, and even the fact that we've even initiated the discussion before means that when he touches the ball, he might move forward and get involved a little bit more in the game. And those are the things that we need to start to be able to discuss. And
it's funny, I had 2 reflections on that today, actually, just popped into my head. One was, you talk about designing into the game, either an affordance or whatever it might be. So in my game, it was a fairly open-ended game, but it had 2 goals. As in, there was 2 areas that you could score in on either side of the field. Both teams could score in the wide areas. And if they were smart, they would move the ball to another area of space so they could then carry the ball through the game. And that was the main aim of the game, really. But I wanted to really, because they could do that through passing, and the game was really designed to try and look at how they could do that through the carrying the ball, and I wanted to emphasise that. So the affordance I built in was given the bonus points every time they were made an effective carry to space, and the idea was to carry to connect. So each of the games had slightly different themes. So mine was about carrying to connect. And I heard during one of the the debriefs that the players did, one of the players, he's quite an astute young man, another Ollie, say, don't even go for the goals, because they're only worth the same amount of points as if you get the bonus points by carrying space to connect. So just do that. And I was like, and I then said, goals are worth 2. And I thought, why did I do that? Afterwards, now I've thought about it, I think, why did I do that? Because actually, he'd picked up on the affordance. He'd picked up on the opportunity for action, which is carry to space and connect. That's how you win the game. And in fact, we'll get more bonus points for doing that than we would if we get the game. So what I then did was I strengthened the attractor of the goal.
Yeah.
Because I still wanted them to probably make the carry through the goal. But I don't know why I did that, so I probably didn't need to. Because what I might have then seen is lots more of the behaviour, because it's just as attractive as the outcome of the goal. They just carry to space and connect, carry to space and connect.
What's the intention of the training session?
What's the intention of the training session?
So
I trip myself up.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. I mean,
of course.
And I reflect on it now and think, right, well, now I know that, I won't strengthen that. I won't strengthen the attraction to goal.
Yeah.
I'll strengthen the attraction of the behaviour that we're looking to expose.
Yeah.
Because it clearly had its effect, well, certainly for him.
yeah, like, okay. And this actually draws into the idea of how representative is representative enough. So maybe part of your thought process was like, okay, we still want people to score goals.
Yeah, so we still need to have that goal.
So I want to draw people to scoring that goal, but I know this debate of maybe directionality comes into play a lot as well. Like, people talk about the importance of directionality and whatnot.
By directionality, I assume you mean, just so I understand, having direction.
Yeah. So like we want to go
like a rondo's non-directional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We want to go towards the goal, or we don't want to go towards the goal.
Yeah.
How important is it to have direction? And that depends on the intention of the training session.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I might play a 1v1 chasing game where we have a box where there's no direction. It's just your main activity here is to keep the ball off the other player.
Yeah.
That's it. Because the intention is to retain the ball.
Yeah.
Is to not lose the ball. Now, we might have a 1v1 situation where I want you to beat the player.
Yeah.
Now, that changes. Now, direction doesn't always matter. Because the intention could be different. Because we want to understand how we can use the space.
Yeah.
So, if the intention of the activity is to retain the ball, then the way that we use the space is different than if we want to win the space in behind.
Yes.
And that's really important. And you can afford that, and you can change the way that the game's designed to afford those opportunities to people.
Yeah.
And that comes to the reflectiveness on, okay, what is my intention for this activity?
Yes.
And that's the thought process that you need to go towards when you're designing. And that comes back to, okay, now, we don't just want to play the game always.
Yes. So this isn't just about running into space and passing to each other. There's still an aim, which is to get through the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe actually now I'm going to talk myself back round to saying I did exactly the right thing. Because what I did was I strengthened it, but I didn't strengthen it so much it became the be-all and end-all.
Right. Yeah.
So clearly I'm a genius.
That's what we keep telling ourselves.
That's a useful coach development discussion. You've helped me reflect there, because I'd come away from that unhappy with that element.
Right.
Feeling like I'd probably not quite got it where I wanted to get it to. But like you say, from the perspective of intention and from the perspective of representativeness, but I suppose one thing I could have done is I could have left the points the same, as in you get a point for a goal, you get a point for a carry to connect, for a while, and observed what happened, having heard that individual make that observation. So clearly they'd seen there's value here. Let's do that, and then strengthened the goal outcome in terms of available points to see what difference that then makes, or added that in at a later stage.
Sure.
And that might have been we only had about 20 minutes with each group, so we're rotating round, but that's something I might take away for the next one in terms of being a bit more intentional with the use of the points, perhaps.
Yeah.
Use of the bonuses.
And that's the fun of the ecological approach.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's
not pre-planned.
There's no such thing as a perfect practice.
It's okay. This happened today.
Yeah.
This is the outcome that we had.
Yeah.
Now, let's reflect on it. Let's think about it, and then let's bring it back and see what we can do differently. Maybe in the next session, or maybe we keep it the same.
If I hadn't heard Ollie say what he said, that he'd literally spotted the flaw in the plan, I probably wouldn't have made a change.
Yeah.
So it's only by, like you say, reacting to what you're seeing in front of you that you actually start to tweak off the back of it.
And I know that we were talking in the car on the way before the training session about the idea of in designing this through defending.
Yeah.
So, and this is a really like a fascinating concept for me is this idea of in designing affordances through maybe changing what the opposition are doing. So, okay, we're going to concentrate on this idea of defending explicitly, but implicitly these actions are coming out, and maybe we're explicitly talking about a certain way to defend, but then the way that the attacking team is then approaching it is different. And I know probably a lot of people have discussed this with you before, but we can start to then, okay, one coach is working with, like maybe if you have two coaches on the run, one coach is working with these guys, the other coach is just sitting back and observing and seeing what the attacking team is doing in this moment to experience the affordance that is being afforded to them, and to take advantage of it, or to take advantage of the opportunity, or as Ian will talk about, exploiting. So we're searching and then we're exploiting the opportunities that are in front of us.
And I think that for me is an area that I'm working on a lot and intend to do more with, which is this. I want to genuinely, we sort of ended the podcast with Ian last week about this constraint to afford, and I sort of dangled in front of him the concept of affordance-led coaching. So we talk about constraint-led. I actually think it should be affordance-led. Constraints are a means by which to to create focus on an affordance, or I like Andrew Wilson's concept of almost like, if you think about it like an aperture on a camera, and you put constraints in place to either put things into more focus, or to take the focus, to like a wide angle lens, so there's lots of things in vision, or a narrow focus that gives you just a few things to consider. And I like thinking about it in that way. And but I also like the idea of, if I provide a defender with a set of tasks, what adaptations do we get in the attacker? And if we're intentional about the ways in which we provide the defenders with their tasks, then what the attackers do is adapt to that, sometimes blindly, sometimes subconsciously. But what we can then do is help them to create this collective, shared affordance through heightening their awareness of the fact that they have reacted in this way.
Meta affordance.
Meta affordance. Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before.
Rather than metacognition, we look at affording for affordances.
Yeah.
Shared affordance is like, the idea of shared affordance is incredible. It really is.
It'd probably be worth expanding on how you understand a shared affordance. I'd be interested to get that, actually, because I think I understand it in a certain way, but I'd be interested to get your sense of.
So I think, like, when we discuss the idea of a shared affordance, or we also look at shared intentionality. So what is the intention that we're sharing as a team in this moment? And then, okay, are we seeing the same affordance at the same, or are we understanding the same affordance at the same time?
Yeah.
Are we as a team, are we as a group or as a collective understanding the same affordance that is in front of us right now? And if we're looking at team sports, that's what we need to be able to do. And I like the idea of understanding so we have independence as a player. So everyone's dependent at one stage. As a player, we have dependency. Like, we need other people to help us solve problems.
Yeah.
Then we become independent. We can solve problems by ourselves. And then we become interdependent. We can solve problems with others. Collectively.
Yeah.
And in independency, that's when we start to share affordances. And shared affordance at the nth degree is players working together to co-create environments and contexts for the benefit of themselves. So now we're sharing the intention, we're sharing the affordances through co-creating environments for our benefit. And that's what you see top sporting teams do.
Yeah.
Where you have a team, we talked about pressing earlier tonight, not on the podcast, but we talked about it earlier tonight, where you have a team co-creating a context to win the ball back. And they're doing that through shared affordances, through shared understanding in that exact moment. And that comes through shared intentionality, and it kind of leads on to having a shared affordance as well.
Yeah, so, I've heard other academics from sort of, maybe a different kind of stable, if you like, or conceptualization of psychology, and, they talk about a shared mental model.
Yeah.
For me, that's like a shared intentionality in many ways. It's about a clear idea of what do we intend to achieve here. A shared affordance, as I understand it, and you've captured that, is groups of individuals understanding or having a collective sense that the information coming to them from the environment within which they are playing, that information leads to collective action that's coherent. And so, people talk about a game plan, and they think I've certainly heard people talk about a shared mental model and a game plan and all these sorts of things, and they think that a game plan is sort of similar. It's not. So a game plan is a strategy. It's a way of saying that this is the way we're going to approach the game. These are the things that we're going to try to do. We believe these things are advantageous to us. They're prescribed, whereas shared affordances are in the moment, and they're based on against a framework like a shared mental model, or even an intentionality framework of saying these are the ways in which we collectively aim to act.
Our principles
at play, exactly. Our principles, but within that, in the moment, we're going to need to adapt that, right? So we're going to stay within that framework as much as we possibly can. But if you and I, as a pairing, see our opposition do something that suggests to us that if we both coordinate in a certain way we can gain an advantage, we should take that advantage. And that's, for me, genuinely skilled behaviour, because genuinely skilled behaviour is not adhering to a pre-prescribed plan. Genuinely skilled behaviour is understanding a pre-prescribed plan and then utilising the information in front of you to exploit what you've pre-designed in the best way possible. And sometimes that might be going against what the pre-designed plan was, because the opportunity in front of us suggested such.
Yeah, as team sport, you're continuously searching for these opportunities, and you're working, and this is maybe why it's really important, and a lot of people look at it. And to be fair, even though we talk about ecological psychology in a certain, a lot of people are using it without knowing that they're using it. That's the wrong way of framing it. Sorry. Ecological dynamics is a theoretical underpinning, right? Which is how we understand human behaviour and neurobiological systems. We're using that to justify the way that we coach. And some of us are coming from that justification. Some of us have already started coaching and have developed their own understanding of how they coach. which can be justified
Yeah.
using ecological dynamics,
Yeah.
which I would implore people to, or I would suggest to people that it's good to have that fundamental justification underpinning what they're doing as a coach, as a practitioner.
I think that's an important point, and I think a lot of people are finding this, and I think you're absolutely right, because people, I think there's a lot of very, very highly skilled practitioners out there who, either through trial and error, or because of the way they have conceptualized the world, or because they've read some of the underpinning theoretical work, or they've come across others who were influenced by that theoretical work, which has been around a long time, have come to the conclusion that human beings respond to their environment quite exquisitely, and so have sought to exploit that fact as a means by which to help human beings become more proficient at any task, any activity, any skill. And what they've now found is, as ecological dynamics becomes more understood and more talked about and more prevalent, is, and I think this happened to me to a certain extent, which is, oh, bloody hell, there's a body of knowledge out there that actually supports a lot of the things that I've been trying to do, and not only supports it, but actually helps me now to take it further and do more with it. And so, but I think you make a really important point, which is, and I said this to you earlier, which is understanding that is absolutely central. Because if you've just been doing it because it's sort of made intuitive sense to you, brilliant, that's amazing, and crack on. But once you discover, actually, there's a body of work out there that not only supports what you're doing, but can probably take you in different directions, then it really opens up a wealth of opportunity. That's certainly the experience I've had.
Yeah, and that's, like, again, we've talked about this before. This is where we've got to be better as academics and as people who understand the theoretical concepts maybe a little bit better. We need to share those, and we need to make them accessible. And we need to continue to make them accessible, and people are doing it. And there's a whole range of people now who are taking it upon themselves, and it's really like, I've taken myself off social media to a degree because first of all, I want to take a break from it, but also I see people who are doing a phenomenal job at this, an incredible job, and you're just like have a look at what these guys are writing, and have a look at the videos that these guys are making, or the podcasts that they're putting out, because they are really starting to become more and more accessible ideas, and it's making something that even last year, or like the beginning of last year, we were just starting this, and it's just taken off.
Yeah,
it's just I can just feel that it's starting to really take off, and there's people jumping on board and doing stuff, and
young researchers, young researchers coming out with amazing things.
But governing bodies,
true,
jumping on board and looking at this stuff and going up. And all it takes is a couple of governing bodies to get involved, and then more will jump on. And new NZ Sport doing what they did, like I said, like, they're a pioneer, and now hopefully other governing bodies will see that and want to do that as well. Yeah. And we need people to continue to share what they're sharing, and we need people to continue to do what they're doing, because it's bloody important. It's bloody important. And yeah, like, I know we've mumbled our way through the podcast, but I think we've hit some really key points there of about, at the start we talked about, okay, what does sport really mean for our community? How important is it for our community? We've talked about, okay, how can we maybe bring community together? Maybe we can do it through pedagogy. And then we're ending it with the idea of, okay, pedagogy is really taking this front foot step here, or this forward step at the moment, which is heartening to see, and it gives us good signs for the future.
Couldn't have. You've done my job for me again. You've wrapped up beautifully. I don't even have to do my usual wrap up at the end. Ben, really enjoyed talking to you. There might be a little bit of a bonus part 2 to this, where we maybe share some reflections from tomorrow's conference up in Sheffield with Keith Davids and the crew and Mark on the way home in the car. But in the meantime, appreciate what you're doing. I know you're flying back to Oz fairly soon, and it may well be that you resurrect some of the videos that you were producing, or different ideas start emerging. But again, opposite direction. People want to track you down just to kind of give them that point. I know you're not probably responding at the moment because you're off the grid, but I know you're always keen to chat to people. So if they do want to reach out, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, so my email address, the best email address to get me on these kind of ideas is ben.oppositedirection@gmail.com. I'm still checking Twitter, and I'm occasionally putting a tweet out here and there. It's hard to completely go off the grid, but I do have plans to get some more videos out there. And I think the next step for me is, we've talked a lot about ecological psychology, and I think that's probably the easier part of ecological dynamics. And the next step for me is to go into dynamical systems theory, and to make that accessible for everyone as well, and for coaches to start to understand some of those ideas. So yeah, that's probably where I'm going to head next with Opposite Direction, is diving a little bit into dynamical systems theory and trying to make that accessible. I think that's the next step where we really need to go, and I think there's a lot of value in doing that. So yeah, as always, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, and I know we're passionate about what we do, and I appreciate all the coaches for what they're doing, and I'm very grateful to be part of this community. So yeah, thanks.
And thanks for talking to me, and all the best with what happens in the next step, including the conclusion of your masters, having done your sabbatical.
Yeah, hopefully Ian will be Ian and Brendan will be very happy if I finish that one off. That's for sure.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.